And we're live.
She reads books on white supremacy, drinking wine in the garden in her yard. And he dreams he'll do the work of racial justice, but it seems it's just too hard. Meanwhile, down in Oakland, they're beating up Asian Americans in the road. Proud Boys all stand ready to moisten city streets with human blood. Does anybody still believe these days the human race is not a dying cause? If you do, let's dance, 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 dance. Dance in the dragon's jaws. Some people want to trash the past and tell us it won't help us anymore. Some people want to run back to yesterday and build the walls of hate much higher than before. Some preachers make enemies of people that they do not understand. Then you got the Harvey Weinsteins and their ilk, who make a woman a plaything for a man. Does anybody still believe that human dignity is not a dying cause? If you do, let's dance, 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 dance in the dragon's jaws. Took a ride into the future where the rats patrol the streets all night and day. And people plug into the matrix and let the virtual reality dream their scares away. And they punch up sweet oblivion so they will not hear a dying planet scream. And if you ask them what went wrong, they simply stare at you and say, "Man, what do you mean?" Does anybody still believe these days planet Earth is not a dying cause? If you do, let's dance, 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 dance in the dragon's jaws. My piano and dream about the future I would see. I could help to make this world a place where people could be free. I look around the world these days, dreams are only smoke rings in the air. And dreamers fall right through the cracks. All at once you look and they're not there. Does anybody still believe these days the human race is not a dying cause? Well, if you do, let's dance, 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 dance in the dragon's jaws. So welcome to this, whatever it is, concert, talk, thing, whatever. Some of you have asked the question about our show concerning addiction. That show has been postponed. We had some technical difficulties with the story that we're going to be telling, so that show has been postponed. This show we're calling Old Bones New Life, and it's about preaching. It's about the wonderful gift of words that change lives and that turn things around and that make the world a wholly different place to be. A couple of songs first, and then we'll get right into it. Thank you for joining our party this afternoon, and it is quite a party. We have a number of really fun, cool people joining us this afternoon. But a couple of songs first, and this one is one you'll know well. It's an old hymn that I have come to love over the years, like this. Fall fresh on us. Spirit of the living God, fall fresh on us. See us wake us free us, take us, Spirit of the living God, fall fresh, fresh on us. us. Free us. Oh, take us, take us, take us, take us. Spirit of the living God, fall fresh and wake us, take us, see us, free us, wake us, take us, shake us, break us, see us, free us, love us, move us, know us, show us, send us, befriend us, free us, see us, wake us, take us, reach us, teach us, reach us, teach us, teach us, teach us, teach us, teach us to dance, dance, dance in the dragon's jaws. Yeah. Let me just say a little word about my guest before I introduce him, because that will have a lot to do with the song that you're going to hear. Our guests, plural today actually, the Reverend Dr. James Forbes. Dr. James Forbes is preacher, teacher, scholar, thinker, author. One book I know of, The Holy Spirit and Preaching, was written back in the 80s. He is a world-renowned, sought-after conference speaker. He has certainly been one of those voices in the 20th and 21st century who's called for the healing of the nation, called for justice in every possible way. We first came across him, my wife and I, and another friend who's here, Nancy Sehested. Nancy was with us at Union Theological Seminary in New York, and Dr. Forbes was the preacher, the teaching of preaching in those years. He has also been the pastor of the Riverside Church in New York, and now he is keeping himself busy doing all kinds of conferences. He has a big conference this weekend, and it was very generous and kind of him to give us this time. Also joining Dr. Forbes, four wise women. The first of those is Beverly Vandermolen, who is actually producing the show tonight. You won't see her, she's backstage. Then my wife, Jane Medema, who in fact took Dr. Forbes' preaching class when she was getting her degree at Union Seminary. Our dear friend Nancy Sehested, who also was in Dr. Forbes' preaching course, and Nancy's sister Abigail Hastings, who actually worked with Dr. Forbes as his facilitator, co-worker, assistant, troubleshooter, etc., etc. So we're going to have Dr. Forbes and the harem in conversation in just a moment. But I wanted to tell you that because we're going to be talking about images that have come out of his sermons, and one of them that I remember very clearly. I was called upon a few years ago to write some texts around the miracle stories in the book of John. And one of those, you'll remember, the first one, is the story about the wedding feast in Cana, where Jesus turned the water into wine. And Dr. Forbes went on about how, in fact, wine was that substance that brought folks together at the table, that made the table fellowship more courteous and kind, and was the sort of unifying thing. And then he said, our culture has run out of wine. And he went on to talk about the hubris and the anger and the hatred that seems so pervasive in the culture. The culture is running out of wine. The culture is running out of wine. We need wine. We need that civility, that gentleness, that respect for each other. And so when I was called upon to write text, the first thing that happened is I thought of this sermon and that the way that he put those images in my heart. So I'm going to sing this song called The Gift of Wine. And then I'm going to introduce our guests. So here we go. As I look around me, clearly I can see life does not begin to be what life was meant to be. Days have lost their splendor, nights have lost their shine. Hearts are dry and thirsty since the feast is out of wine. Riches all around us, possessions piled high, symbols of our striving rising high into the sky. Frantically we're searching for what we cannot find, and there is no satisfaction since the feast is out of wine. Wine of sweet communion, wine of home and place, wine of love and laughter, wine of gift and love whose blood was freely shed, a new life to release. Grant to us the gift of wine, till all our thirsting cease. See the walls around us, see the wars go on, the wealthy rule by treachery, all hope of peace is gone. Brothers kill one another for rewards they'll never find. And hearts have turned to hubris since the feast is out of wine. Wine of sweet communion, wine of home and place, wine of love and laughter, wine of gift and grace. Love whose blood was freely shed, a new life to release. Grant to us the gift of wine, till all our thirsting cease. Now my thoughts turn inward. Clearly I can see my soul is like a desert, there's a mighty thirst in me. Days that once were a miracle now have lost their shine. All I taste is tedium since my soul is out of wine. Wine laughter, wine of gift and grace. Love whose blood was freely shed, a new life to release. Grant to us the gift of wine. Grant to us the gift of wine. Grant to us the gift of wine, till all our thirsting cease. And now, it is my pleasure to introduce three wonderful women, Jane Medema, Nancy Sehested, and Abigail Hastings, and Dr. James Forbes. Howdy, everybody.
Hello.
Are we all here? Are we all here? I heard a voice.
Hello.
Hi.
All right. Jim, are you here?
I'm here.
All right. Well, we wanted to bring in some friends of yours, sir, because we wanted them to just glow for a second in some Dr. Forbes memories. Who wants to start this off?
Well, I'll be glad to. I was in Dr. Forbes' first homiletics class at Union Theological Seminary back in the late 70s. Oh my goodness. Has it been that long, Dr. Forbes? No, let's not go. Let's not say dates. Let's not do that.
76.
And what I remember in those first classes is that you said that the sermon was a conversation and engagement with the biblical text, with the congregation and listeners in the context of the moment, with the preacher as the messenger, and with the Holy Spirit. And I remember that you always were inviting us to bring the story close enough to us that there was no doubt that we are a part of this grand story of God. And how blessed and grateful I am that you were my professor and teacher and have been throughout all these years. I still learn from you, and I thank you.
Thank you so much.
And Nancy, you're still preaching it. You're still preaching it. Jane?
Yeah, we actually, Abigail and Nancy and I and our families were all living together at that time in the edge of New Jersey and coming into New York City often. And so we had lots of time to talk about what happened in our classes, and we got to sharing some James Forbes stories pretty often. They were pretty fun. I want to mention one that's especially important to me because I loved your art of words, and you shared that with us, the importance of taking care with how we said things, as you did. And that has stayed with me ever since. Also, one hard and fast rule you taught us, and I want to ask you about it. You said, never preach your sermon until you've discovered what the good news in it is. And my memory is that people who were new to the art of preaching sometimes struggled with that. Because it was easy to understand that the prophetic word is challenging, often confrontational, and it says to us, you've got to change. But you taught us to find the open window, the good news that made it important about what we were saying.
So
I am so interested in that because it is in an angry and violent world that we're in right now. It is good news that will woo us and win us, that will invite us into change. And I'd like your perspective on that. What you think about that?
what's the
What
good
would
news
be your
now?
message today about that?
What's the good news now?
Well, thank you so very much, Jane, for reminding me of those words said years ago. I think it is very true that these are bad news days in many ways.
Amen.
In fact, these are such tough times that years ago, at the beginning of the former administration, a sister of the church met me downtown and she said, "Pastor, things are so bad that I'm just about convinced that these are the last days." And fascinating, after she had made those comments, I was led during some kind of Bible study to read, and I've got it right here, 2 Timothy. And listen to what I found out. That this woman was right, because she said, these must be the last days. Hear these words. You must understand this, that in the last days, you got that? Last days. Of course, there are a whole lot of last days in the Bible. Not all of them are totally eschatological. Not all of them are totally apocalyptic. But when it gets so tough that clearly only God can bring relief from the conditions we are struggling with. But listen, the word said in the last days, people will be lovers of themselves, lovers of money, boasters, arrogant, abusive, disobedient to parents, ungrateful, unholy, inhuman, implacable, slanderers, profligates, brutes, haters of good, treacherous, reckless, swollen with conceit, lovers of pleasure rather than lovers of God, holding to the outward form of godliness but denying its power. Avoid them. Is there anybody who wants to question whether these
That's a long list.
whether they're the last days or the near last days? Clearly, these are distressing times. So that's the bad news. So I was, according to our rule and the principle we had in the class, I wasn't going to quit until I found another last days passage that would hold some promise. I can't preach it until I find some good news. And I found some, which I'm happy to share with you. The book of Acts, chapter 2, verses 17 and 18. Check these last days. Now, this is what was spoken through the prophet Joel in the last days. That is, Nancy, I had to search hard for some good news. But in the last days, it will be, God declares, that I will pour out my spirit upon all flesh, and your sons and your daughters shall prophesy, and your young men shall see vision, and your old men shall dream dreams. So what I did is I can talk about the awful, the gosh awful bad things of the time. But there is also the last days when God will pour out God's spirit on all flesh. So that no matter how bad things are, God is at work pouring out God's spirit upon those who are able to open their hearts to the leading and empowering presence of that spirit. So once again, the rule hangs in there. No matter how bad it is, if God is at work in it, there's some good news. And of course, for me, it always boils down to the fact that Romans 8:28. That's my text, y'all. For we know that all things work together for good to those who love the Lord and are called according to God's purpose. John Bennett, the once the president at Union Seminary, said, now, that doesn't mean that God wills everything. God wills something out of everything. That has given me absolute confidence that even when the worst is prowling the streets like mad dogs, God is an expert in taking the worst, finding some good in it. And that's a general principle you can put your money on. God's working in it. Find good.
Yeah.
That theme of finding the good is also a characteristic of what you're going to say to folks on Sunday, are you not? About dry bones and new life?
Yes, yes. As a matter of fact, when I read the words, the committee gave me the theme, Can These Bones Live? I started to preach some of those old sermons that I used to preach about them bones coming together. But a higher consciousness seized me and said, when God asked Ezekiel, can these bones live? What God was inquiring about was, Ezekiel, do you believe that there is remediation in response to the awful circumstances of our time? And God, as I see the picture, waited till he said, O Lord, thou knowest. Which now I understand what he was saying is, Lord, there are so many improbabilities in our situation, so many imponderables in our situation, such a depth of despair all around, until with my normal understanding, I cannot guarantee anybody a positive prognostication. But and this was the thing that opened up the whole passage. He said, O God, thou knowest. Which is almost to say, God was asking him to make an affirmation of faith. Our fundamental theology about God and God's sovereignty would include omniscience, omnipotence, and omnipresence. And Ezekiel said, thou knowest. That was just a piece of that Trinitarian affirmation about the sovereignty of God. And that was all God needed. God said, good. If you are still affirming my possibility, there's a good news again. No matter how bad things are, if you are confident that I am at work, then let's go to work. And that's what I'm going to be talking about. Let's go to work. The Lord led him by the Spirit. The Spirit comes and leads him and shows him what to do. And basically what I'm going to be talking about, Ken, is, folks, God is looking at the situation as it is now, and God is at work, and God is recruiting people who will be Spirit-anointed servants of God, even in these tough times. And I think, as a matter of fact, the sermon has really touched me. I'm committing myself to do all I can to be an instrument in the hands of God, to let the Spirit lead me day by day as best I'm able to understand what God's call is. I want to do that till I die.
Yeah.
Could this be the last days? Could these be the last days? Evil walks the streets of our cities. Evil sits in the places of judgment. Evil runs in the places, in the hallowed spaces that we once thought could be pure and could be clean. Evil seems to be everywhere. It doesn't take much to see. These are troubled times. Could they be the last days? Then you get the word in the last days. I'll pour out my spirit on all flesh. Your young ones will see visions, and your old ones will dream dreams. And the old bones you thought were dead will come alive again. That's what's going to happen in the last days. I remember the last days of summer when the chilly winds began to blow. The trees started losing their leaves, and we knew it wouldn't be long before the snow. And I remember the last days of my childhood when I did not want to leave it. All at once, I'm supposed to be grown up, and now I can't help but grieve it. Maybe the last days of the rest of my life, I'll begin to understand that in these last days we can be led by the power in God's hand. And so you committed yourself to be God's instrument. We want to do that too. So in these last days, we want to join hand in hand with you. Are we all still here?
Yeah.
Yeah, we are. Anybody want to say some words?
I think it's Abigail's turn.
I do think so.
Well, one thing that's been going through my mind, we are handmaidens of sermonic challenge, and so often you're presented with a sermon that you're preaching, and you're just not sure how you're going to get into it or what word is going to be there, and then you get in the word, which is what you taught us, and you get in the word and you're going to discover something, and there's going to be a richness there, and it will surprise you because it might not be what you thought it was. And I love that about the biblical work of it. But then we think of Dr. Forbes, and we think of the times that we've been under your preaching, and we not only have the word, we not only have exegesis, We have your heart, mind, soul, and strength, but then we get your singing and your poetry, and it's an embarrassment of riches all in one place, Dr. Forbes. It's just a little too much and a little too much of a challenge. But the thing that I'm always struck with your story, and I don't know that we need to look back to it, but I'm always struck by how when you received your call, when your bones were awakened, it was not through reading the text. It was not in the Word. It was not on Damascus Road. It was hearing music, and not even, I told Jesus he could change my name to Reverend. It was entirely something else. So I think in a way, to be open to how we are called, and I'm always remembering that unique way that you received your call.
Well, I didn't know that.
Well, say something a little about that, Doc.
Listen, I'm always happy to talk about that because it was a night in which I was really thinking like it was the end of a long journey and I couldn't see where it was headed. I heard the sermon preached in Washington, D.C. at a church 1015 D Street Northeast. And the poor preacher preached from Isaiah chapter 6. In the year that King Uzziah died, I saw also the Lord high and lifted up, and his train filled the temple. He went on to preach that sermon. And then he said, after the Lord had shown himself, that Isaiah said, woe is me, for I am undone. And then, you know what he said? He said, there it is. Let me tell you about undone. He said, kids used to eat a lot of molasses in the country. And I heard him one day crying out to the mama, Mama, we need some biscuits in here. And Mama said, you're going to have to wait. The biscuits are in the oven, but they ain't done yet. And then he said, there's some folks like that. Why did he say that? There are some folks that are in the oven, but they ain't done yet. And that was me, because I was in vocational quandary regarding whether I was going to be a medical doctor or whether I was going to be a preacher. So it so disturbed me. I told an untruth when I told him I enjoyed your sermon. I didn't enjoy that sermon. That was a disturbing sermon. And here I had spent 3 years majoring in chemistry, and this was the 4th year. I'm getting ready to reach my senior year. And you mean to tell me I might not be able to complete my plan to become a medical doctor? I didn't like it one bit. So I was disturbed when I went home. And then I put on my music. Now remember, y'all, I'm from Howard University. That ain't just no ordinary college. That's the capstone of Negro education. I mean, Vice President Harris would agree with that. That's our college. So I'm a high class guy, so I put on my music. Tchaikovsky Symphony No. 4 in F minor. And that music was very soothing. I began to settle back, especially you. Ken, you know this one. Da 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 da.
Yep, yep.
Da 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 da. And I was beginning to feel pretty good, settling back, and then that section came and said, da 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 da. Let me tell you. It felt like Eugene Ormandy and the Philadelphia Symphony Orchestra got together with Tchaikovsky. And I thought I heard, Jim Forbes, don't you know I have called you? Jim Forbes, don't you know I have called you? Yes, oh yes, I have called you. And I said, I better get my mind off this. But then you know what happened to me? Dun, 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 dun. I don't care what you do. I have made up my mind. I want you to be a servant of the word. That's how it happened.
they listen. Some folks be still in the oven. What will come tomorrow? All is still unknown. Maybe there's a brand new calling. Spirit on your life is falling. Cannot stay where you have been. Something new we must begin. Maybe your bones are old now. Maybe your bones feel dead now. But there is new life waiting. No more hesitating. In these last days, may your calling be renewed. In this last day, may you find what's right and true. In these last days. When the bread comes out of the oven, may you be the feast for the world. Okay, well, I gotta say, this has been an absolutely wonderful, wonderful, wonderful hour. I'm going to sing a couple more songs, but anybody want to say a parting word here?
We're going to be anxious to hear what you're doing in this phase of your life. Anything you want to mention before we go? What's most important to you right now?
Well, in 1984, in Minneapolis, Minnesota, I was preaching at the Midwinter Conference for the Church of the Covenant. It was cold. Oh, Lord, it was cold. So they said, we'll be there to pick you up shortly. So meanwhile, this was the time to pray. So I knelt down beside my bed and I prayed, Lord, I'm running all over this country. I'll be dead before 50 years old if I don't find out what I'm supposed to be focusing on. What is the focus of the ministry to which you're calling me? And the Lord said to me, I have heard your prayer, and I am answering your prayer in the form of the cadence of your clap. Because I was saying, Lord, I need to know what the focus is of what I ought to be doing. And so the Lord said, the focus of my clap. So I listened, and this is what I heard. The spiritual renewal of the nation is the task to which I have called you. That was 1984. This is 2021. And it's amazing how, as our nation proves to be in a serious state of despiritualization, that same message is with me. At 85 years old, I don't know whether I got a few months, years to live, but for whatever else my life is about, my central aspiration is to help call our nation to re-spiritualization. If ever there was a need for a great awakening, spiritual renewal, It's now. And my work is about doing everything I can to say much of the trouble we're facing is because we have pushed the Spirit to the side. It is the Spirit that will give us life again. And for those who are willing to make themselves instruments of God's Spirit, we can be a part of the transformation, of the restoration of God's people. We don't know what God is going to do with the United States of America. But the good news will be God is calling those who will to be members of God's dream team. And let's follow the fact that God's dream team has the Holy Spirit as the coach. And when we get up in the morning and say, Holy Spirit, lead me, guide me as I move throughout this day. May your prompting deep inside me show me what to do and say. In the power of your presence, strength and courage will increase. In the wisdom of your guidance is the path that leads to peace. And then get out on our way. The old bones will rise again. And new life will be ours. Listen, on this side of the river, but if not, there's a place where new life will abound because God has spoken it.
Thank you.
And our several hundred viewers around the country who have heard you are rejoicing tonight. And I want to say before we sing our last song, and we'll all stay here together. Before I do the last song, I want to say, speak my gratitude and that of all of us for you, sir, bringing us a word of challenge and comfort and consolation and wisdom. And I want to just say we're going to have to do this again sometime. One last song. And for those of you who are in the audience, if you want to donate to this work, you know what to do. It's www.interluderetreats.org. Next week, our show is a kids show for children, young children, and those who are young at heart. If you're between the ages of and you're welcome to next week's program. Our show on addiction will announce that. But next week is Children's Week, so if you have kids around, make sure I have some wonderful guests, puppets and stories and all kinds of fun things coming up next week. Meanwhile, I want to shout out to our friends in Texas especially, who are going through the most horrendous disaster. And I want to shout out to Mattress Mac, who has opened his huge gallery furniture store for literally hundreds and hundreds of people to sleep and be warm and be fed in Houston. The song is about laying down your life, and sometimes laying down your life means you got to die for the cause, but sometimes it means you lay down your life in small ways, and sometimes it means you lay down your expectations, and sometimes it means you lay down those profits that you would have received had you sold those mattresses at full price. So thank you, Mac, and thank you all in Texas who are doing such good work, and this will end our program. And this is love, and this is love, that a man lay down his life for his friends. And this is love. have heard it said, love your friends and hate your enemies. And yet I say to you, love your enemies too. If you love me, do the things I command you. Love one another as I have loved you, as I have loved you. And this is a love, and this is a love, that a man lay down his life for a woman, lay down her life, that a follower lay down a life for the friend. Good night, everyone. Stay safe. See you next week.